The betrayal. Vance Blackwood had survived 3 interplanetary wars, 14 assassination attempts, and one particularly vindictive ex-wife. But nothing had prepared him for the message that flashed across his neural implant at exactly 300 hours. They've activated Prometheus. Get back to Oblivion Point. You're already dead. The sender, Colonel Riker Frost, a man who'd been listed as deceased for the past 2 years. Vance stared at the ceiling of his rented apartment on Nova Thessaly, the pounding rain outside matching the thundering of his heart. Oblivion Point, the decommissioned military outpost he'd been tasked with disposing of after the Centauri Accord. The facility he'd sold to Helix Dynamics for enough credits to disappear permanently. Or so he'd thought. "Zara," he murmured, activating his AI assistant. "Run verification on this signature." A soft blue light pulsed near his temple. Verification complete. 98.7% match to Colonel Riker Frost's neural pattern. Message origin, Oblivion Point Research Station, Sublevel 8. Vance sat up, suddenly cold. Sublevel 8 doesn't exist. "Correct," Zara replied. "Official schematics show only 7 levels." He was already moving, muscle memory taking over as he packed the essentials. His service weapon, the MX-7 precision rifle with custom modifications that had earned him the nickname Ghost Eye during the Proxima campaign. A field med kit, tactical gear. The false identity chips he'd never thought he'd need again. "Zara, what's Prometheus?" The AI hesitated, an unusual pause in her typically instantaneous responses. "Classification, ultraviolet. All files redacted under Military Order 617. Another bad sign. Ultraviolet clearance meant top-secret weapons development, the kind that violated the very treaties that had ended the last war. "When did Helix Dynamics purchase Oblivion Point?" he asked, checking his weapons charge. "Official records indicate the transaction occurred 26 months ago. However, there's an anomaly in the registration sequence." Vance paused. What kind of anomaly? The facility exists simultaneously under 2 separate ownership records. Officially, it belongs to Helix Dynamics. However, a shadow registry entry shows control by an entity called Thanatos Initiative. "Never heard of them." "That's because they don't exist," Zara replied. "At least not in any public or classified database I can access." Perfect, a ghost corporation running experiments in a facility with floors that didn't exist, sending messages through dead men. Just when he'd thought retirement might actually stick this time. 12 hours later, Vance stood at the edge of the landing zone, staring up at the looming structure of Oblivion Point. The facility had been built into the side of a mountain on this remote moon, originally designed as a forward operating base during the Proxima campaign. Now it looked different, less military, more something else. New construction extended from the original framework, sleek black modules grafted onto the utilitarian gray of the original outpost. The facility should have been bustling with activity. Helix Dynamics had claimed they were converting it to a research station for deep space exploration technology. Instead, the landing pad was empty, the external lights dim, the entire complex exuding an aura of abandoned menace. Zara scanned for life signs. "Unable to penetrate external shielding," she replied. "Detecting unusual energy signatures consistent with quantum field manipulation." Vance frowned. "That's restricted technology." "Yes, banned under Article 7 of the Centauri Accord." Of course it was. He'd helped negotiate those restrictions himself, after witnessing what happened on Proxima IV when the quantum fields collapsed. Thousands dead in an instant, reality itself torn apart. A soft beep from his tactical scanner alerted him to movement, something mechanical patrolling the perimeter. Combat drones, but not any model he recognized. They moved with an uncanny precision, almost predatory. "Security has been significantly upgraded since your last visit," Zara observed. "These aren't standard Helix security protocols." "No," Vance agreed. "They're military-grade, Coalition Special Forces to be precise," which made no sense. The Coalition had been disbanded after the war. He needed to get inside, but the main entrance was clearly monitored. Fortunately, he knew this facility better than its new owners could possibly imagine. When he'd been ordered to prepare it for sale, he'd made certain modifications. Insurance policies, he'd called them. Backdoors only he knew about. East Maintenance Shaft, Section 12 Alpha, he murmured, moving silently through the underbrush. The entrance was camouflaged, designed to look like part of the mountain's natural formation. A small panel, hidden beneath synthetic rock, responded to his biometric signature. The door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a narrow service tunnel. Vance slipped inside, the darkness enveloping him like an old friend. Local mapping active, Zara informed him. Detecting significant structural changes to internal layout. Many sections have been sealed or repurposed. What about sub-level 8? Vance asked, moving through the tunnel with practiced ease. Unknown, no accessible schematics. The maintenance shaft led to a junction box, a nexus point for the facility's older systems. Vance connected Zara to the interface. Interesting, she said after a moment. There are two separate networks operating simultaneously. The visible one appears to be standard research operations, but underneath, there's something else, something heavily encrypted. Can you crack it? Not from here. I need access to a primary terminal. Vance nodded. Security office on level 2 should have what we need. He continued through the narrow passage until he reached an access point to the main facility. The door opened onto a dimly lit corridor that should have been familiar. He'd walked these halls countless times during his years stationed here, but everything felt wrong. The walls were the same industrial gray, but strange symbols had been etched into the metal, patterns that seemed to shift when viewed from the corner of the eye. Zara, what am I looking at? Unknown glyphs, not matching any known language. They appear to be emitting low-level electromagnetic radiation. Great, just great. He made his way toward level 2, avoiding the main corridors and security checkpoints. The facility was unnervingly quiet. He encountered no personnel, saw no signs of the research activity that should have been taking place. Only the occasional patrol drone, which he carefully avoided. The security office was where he remembered, but it had been upgraded. Biometric locks, motion sensors, thermal imaging. Nothing he couldn't handle, but it would take time he wasn't sure he had. Zara, security bypass, protocol shadowed, sir. His implants activated specialized subroutines, interfacing with the security systems. 15 tense seconds later, the door unlocked. Vance slipped inside, securing it behind him. The room was dominated by monitoring stations, screens showing various sectors of the facility. Most were empty, but a few displayed laboratories where technicians in unmarked hazard suits worked on equipment Vance didn't recognize. One screen showed what appeared to be a containment chamber, a swirling mass of energy suspended in a reinforced field. That's it, he murmured. That's Prometheus. Connecting to local network, Zara announced as Vance plugged her into the main terminal. Accessing secure files? Interesting. Project Prometheus isn't a weapon, it's a gateway. To what? Before Zara could answer, an alarm blared. Not the standard security alert, but a deep, resonant tone that seemed to vibrate through the very structure of the facility. Containment breach in sub-level 8, an automated voice announced. All personnel evacuate immediately, quantum stabilization protocols failing. On the monitors, chaos erupted. The energy in the containment chamber pulsed, expanding beyond its boundaries. The technicians fled. Emergency bulkheads began to close. They've been trying to create a stable quantum tunnel, Zara explained rapidly. A doorway to somewhere else, but the calculations were wrong. The breach is expanding exponentially. A new message flashed across the terminal. Vance, if you're seeing this, I've failed. They used my research to build something that should never exist. The only way to stop it is to collapse the entire quantum matrix. The override code is eventide. I'm sorry for bringing you back into this. Riker. The facility shuddered, the lights flickering as power surged through systems never designed to handle such energy. Zara, what happens if that breach continues to grow? Based on these readings, she paused. Complete molecular destabilization, starting here and spreading outward, potentially affecting this entire region of space. Another explosion rocked the facility. Through the security feeds, Vance watched as sections of the lower levels began to warp, the very structure of reality bending under impossible pressures. And then he saw them, figures moving through the distortion. Not human, not anything that should exist in this universe. They moved with a terrible purpose toward the upper levels. Toward him. "We need to get to the primary control center," Vance said, already moving. "If Riker left an override, that's where it needs to be entered." As he stepped back into the corridor, the lights failed completely, plunging the facility into darkness. His tactical visor automatically compensated, casting the world in an eerie green glow. The facility's automated voice spoke again, but now it sounded different. Multiple voices layered over each other, speaking in unsettling harmony. "Welcome back, Major Blackwood. We've been waiting for you." Vance froze. No one had called him Major in years. Not since the court-martial, not since he'd been stripped of his rank after Proxima IV. "How do they know who I am?" he asked. "Unknown," Zara replied. "But facility sensors are registering your presence on all levels simultaneously." A chill ran down his spine as the implication sank in. Whatever was happening here, whatever had breached containment, it wasn't just seeing him. It was seeing every possible version of him across reality itself. And that meant he was already out of time. Shadows in the dark. The darkness surrounding Vance seemed to pulse with malevolent life as he moved through oblivion points, twisting corridors. Emergency lighting bathed everything in a sickly red glow, casting elongated shadows that moved in ways they shouldn't. "Zara, route to the primary control center," Vance whispered, his back pressed against a wall as another tremor shook the facility. "Standard access routes are compromised," she replied. "Detecting spatial anomalies throughout levels 3 through 6. Recommend maintenance shaft Delta 7. A distant, inhuman wail echoed through the ventilation system. Vance tightened his grip on his rifle, the weight of it reassuring against the growing unreality around him. "Define spatial anomalies," he muttered, already moving toward the access point for the maintenance shaft. "Localized breakdowns in standard physics, gravity fluctuations, temporal inconsistencies. In some sections, the interior dimensions exceed the physical boundaries of the facility." "Bigger on the inside, wonderful." Vance pried open the access panel and hauled himself into the narrow shaft. "Any contact from Riker?" "Negative. His last transmission originated from Sublevel 8 approximately 47 minutes ago. No further communications detected." The maintenance shaft felt claustrophobic, barely wide enough for Vance to crawl through. Cables and conduits lined the walls, some sparking dangerously as power surged through overtaxed systems. He moved as quickly as he dared, aware that every minute brought the quantum breach closer to catastrophic expansion. "I need to know more about the Thanatos Initiative," Vance said. "Did you find anything in the security database?" "Limited information. Formed 3 years ago under classified coalition directive. Personnel records show most senior researchers formerly worked on Project Lazarus during the war." Vance stopped mid-crawl. "Lazarus was shut down. I was there when they sealed the facility and destroyed the research." "Evidently not all the research was destroyed," Zara replied. "According to these files, Dr. Alara Quinn recovered key components and continued the work independently before being recruited by Thanatos." Another name from the past. Dr. Quinn had been brilliant, ruthless, and completely amoral, willing to cross ethical boundaries that even hardened military commanders hesitated to approach. Her work on consciousness transfer had earned her both accolades and censure before she disappeared during the final days of the war. "Quinn is involved in this?" Vance resumed his crawl, moving faster now. "That explains the quantum experimentation. She always was obsessed with breaking the barriers between dimensions." "Clarification required," Zara said. "Personnel records indicate Dr. Quinn is listed as deceased. Terminal event occurred 14 months ago during initial Prometheus testing. Then who's running the project now? Before Zara could answer, the shaft ahead of Vance warped, metal twisting like liquid. He scrambled backward just as a section collapsed, revealing a laboratory below that shouldn't have been there, not according to any schematic of Oblivion Point he remembered. The lab was in ruins. Equipment smashed, papers scattered, splashes of something dark dried on the walls. A holographic terminal still flickered in the center, displaying fragmented data about dimensional resonance and consciousness anchoring. "I need to get down there," Vance said. "That terminal might have information we need." Caution advised, detecting unusual energy signatures consistent with quantum instability. Vance lowered himself carefully through the breach in the shaft, dropping into the lab with his weapon ready. The air felt wrong, thicker somehow, with an electric charge that made the hair on his arms stand up. The holographic display flickered as he approached. Most of the data was corrupted, but portions remained readable: test subject statistics, dimensional coordinates, and a recurring phrase: "The Harbinger Protocol." Zara accessed this terminal, download whatever's still intact. As Zara connected, the laboratory doors slid open. Vance whirled, weapon raised, but the corridor beyond was empty, or appeared to be. There was a distortion in the air, like heat waves over desert sand, but moving with purpose. "Download complete," Zara announced. "Warning, security protocols activated. Something is attempting to trace the connection." Vance disconnected immediately, backing away from the terminal. The distortion in the doorway pulsed, taking on a vaguely humanoid shape for just a moment before dissolving again. "What is that?" Vance whispered, though he knew Zara wouldn't have an answer. "Unknown entity. Not registering on standard thermal or motion sensors, but quantum field detectors show significant disruption patterns." The shape pulsed again, more defined this time. A figure, tall and thin, with too many limbs arranged in impossible configurations. It moved into the room without seeming to cross the intervening space, simply existing in one position and then another. Vance fired. The energy pulse from his rifle passed through the entity with no effect. It paused, its form rippling, and then it spoke, not with sound but directly into Vance's mind. "The anchor returns, imperfect, incomplete, but useful." Pain exploded behind Vance's eyes as something cold and alien brushed against his consciousness. Images flooded his mind. Stars viewed from impossible angles, cities built from mathematics rather than matter, and creatures that existed in more dimensions than human senses could perceive. "Get out of my head," Vance growled, staggering backward. The entity pulsed, and Vance felt something probing at his memories, examining his knowledge of Oblivion Point, his relationship with Riker, his involvement with Project Lazarus. "You do not remember," the voice said. "That is unexpected," the others remembered. "Remember what?" Vance demanded, fighting against the invasive presence in his mind. Instead of answering, the entity withdrew abruptly. The distortion collapsed in on itself and vanished, leaving Vance alone in the ruined lab, gasping and disoriented. "Zara, what just happened?" "Unknown. Your neural patterns show significant disruption. I'm detecting unusual activity in your hippocampus and frontal lobe." Vance steadied himself against a workbench. Analyze whatever that thing was saying. What did it mean by anchor? "Processing new data from the terminal," Zara replied. "Project Prometheus appears to have been an attempt to establish stable contact with another dimension, a realm the researchers referred to as the Void. According to these notes, they needed a quantum anchor to maintain connection, someone whose consciousness could serve as a bridge between realities. And they chose Riker for this." "Negative. According to this data, Colonel Frost was not the anchor. You were." Vance's blood ran cold. "That's impossible. I've never been part of any quantum experiment." "Records indicate otherwise. There are extensive files on your neural mapping, genetic sequencing, and something called dimensional resonance profiling. According to this data, you were the primary test subject for Project Lazarus before it was officially terminated." That can't be right, Vance insisted. I was military oversight for Lazarus. I shut it down when Quinn's experiments crossed the line. The records are quite specific, Zara continued. Subject VB7, identified as Major Vance Blackwood. Procedure dates correspond to your deployment on Proxima IV. Vance shook his head, trying to make sense of it. That's when I was injured in the field. I spent 3 weeks in medical recovery before returning to duty. The timeline suggests you were not in medical recovery, but rather undergoing experimental procedures under Dr. Quinn's supervision. Another tremor shook the facility, stronger than before. Dust and debris rained from the ceiling as warning klaxons blared to life. Quantum breach expanding, an automated voice announced. Containment failure imminent. Estimated time to critical mass, 17 minutes. We need to move, Vance said, pushing aside the disturbing revelations for now. If I'm supposedly this anchor, can we use that to shut down the breach? Possibly. The Harbinger Protocol appears to be a contingency measure designed to collapse the quantum tunnel using the anchor's unique neural signature. So I'm the key to stopping this? Yes, but there appears to be a complication, Zara added. The protocol requires direct neural interface with the Prometheus core, and according to these readings, the process is likely fatal to the anchor. Of course it was. Nothing was ever simple in his line of work. Vance checked his weapon and moved toward the door. Then we'd better find another option. Where's the control center from here? 2 levels up, but sensors indicate heavy security presence en route. Not just security, Vance guessed. Those things, whatever came through the breach. Correct, multiple quantum disruptions detected throughout Level 4. As if on cue, the facility's lighting flickered again, and in the momentary darkness, Vance caught glimpses of movement at the far end of the corridor. Silhouettes that twisted and reformed as they moved, hunting. He ducked into an adjacent room, what appeared to be a personnel quarters hastily abandoned. Personal effects littered the floor, evidence of a rushed evacuation. On a desk sat a journal, its pages filled with increasingly erratic handwriting. Day 47. The resonance tests are showing promising results. Subject VB7's neural patterns remain stable despite increased exposure to void energy. Dr. Quinn believes we're close to achieving permanent anchoring. Day 53, first successful breach today. The void entities made contact, though only briefly. They seem particularly interested in VB7's unique signature. Dr. Quinn is ecstatic. Day 61, something is wrong. The entities aren't just observing anymore. They're attempting to modify the anchor points. 3 researchers exposed to direct void energy during today's test. They changed. Security had to terminate them, but not before Jameson took out 2 guards. His strength was impossible. His movements weren't human anymore. Day 68, they keep talking about the Harbinger. I don't think they mean the protocol. I think they're waiting for something to come through, or someone. God help us if Quinn is right about the connection to VB7. The final entry was a scrawled message. They're in my head now. I can feel them changing me. If you're reading this, destroy Prometheus. Destroy the whole facility if you have to. It's the only way to stop what's coming. Vance set the journal down, a cold certainty settling in his gut. They didn't just reactivate Prometheus recently, he said. This has been ongoing for months, maybe years. The message from Riker was just to bring me back at the right moment. That appears to be the case, Zara agreed, though the purpose remains unclear. I think I know, Vance said grimly. They need me to stabilize the breach. I'm not here to stop Prometheus, I'm here to perfect it. Another violent tremor shook the room, knocking equipment from shelves. The facility's AI spoke again, its voice now overlaid with other sounds. Whispering, clicking, sounds no human throat could make. Harbinger Protocol activation sequence initiated. Anchor presence confirmed. Proceed to Prometheus core for final integration. Vance moved to the door, peering cautiously into the corridor. It had changed. No longer the straight passageway it had been moments before. Now it curved impossibly, sections of wall and ceiling replaced with transparent barriers that showed not the expected interior of the facility, but vistas of an alien landscape, a place of twisted geometries and skis filled with structures that hurt the eye to look upon. "The breach is accelerating," Zara warned. "Facility structural integrity compromised, standard navigation no longer reliable." "Then we make our own path," Vance decided, raising his rifle and aiming at the floor. "How far to the level below us?" "Approximately 4.7 meters. "And what's directly beneath us?" "According to original schematics, auxiliary power control. Current status unknown due to facility reconfiguration." "Good enough." Vance adjusted his weapon to maximum yield and fired. The energy blast tore through the floor, creating a smoking hole large enough for him to drop through. He peered down, confirming the space below before jumping. He landed in what had once been the auxiliary power control room, now transformed into something else entirely. The walls were covered in the same strange symbols he'd noticed earlier, but here they glowed with inner light, pulsing in complex patterns. The center of the room was dominated by a cylindrical machine connected to thick cables that disappeared into the ceiling and floor. "What am I looking at, Zara?" "It appears to be a quantum stabilizer, a secondary system for controlling the Prometheus breach. Energy readings suggest it's currently active." "Can we use it to shut down the breach?" "Possibly, but—" Zara's voice cut off abruptly, replaced by static, then silence. "Zara," Vance tapped his neural implant. "Nothing." "Your AI cannot help you here, Major Blackwood." The voice came from behind him. Vance whirled, weapon raised, to find himself facing a woman he recognized immediately despite the changes in her appearance. Dr. Alara Quinn looked both younger and older than when he'd last seen her. Her skin too smooth, her eyes too bright, with an unnatural luminescence behind them. "You're supposed to be dead," Vance said flatly. Quinn smiled, the expression not quite reaching her eyes. "Death is such a limited concept. I prefer to think of it as transcendence." "What have you done to this facility, to yourself?" "I've elevated us," Quinn replied, moving toward the quantum stabilizer. Her movements were fluid but somehow wrong, as if her body was being operated by someone unfamiliar with human locomotion. "Humanity has always been constrained by reality, by physical laws that limit our potential. The entities beyond the void aren't bound by such restrictions." "They're not allies, Quinn. They're using you." "Of course they are," she agreed, unnervingly calm. "Just as we use them. Symbiosis, Major, a mutual exchange of knowledge and capability. They gain access to our reality and we gain so much more." "They get access to our reality," Vance repeated. "And what happens to everyone already living here?" Quinn waved dismissively. "Evolution isn't without casualties. The weak will fade, the strong will adapt. Those with the right resonance will transcend." "Like you did," Vance kept his weapon trained on her. "You don't even move like a human anymore." "I am the prototype," she said with unsettling pride. "The first successful hybrid consciousness, but not nearly as perfect as you will be. I'm not interested in your transcendence." "It's not a matter of interest, Major. It's inevitable. You've been prepared for this role since Proxima IV. Why do you think you survived when everyone else in your unit died? Why do you think we selected you for Project Lazarus?" The facility shook again, more violently this time. Part of the ceiling collapsed, revealing the level above, and with it, multiple distortions in the air, the not quite visible entities moving closer. Quinn smiled up at them. "They're eager to meet you properly, Vance, the perfect anchor, the harbinger who will open the way." Vance backed toward the door, keeping his weapon aimed at Quinn. "Whatever you think I am, whatever you did to me on Proxima IV, I'm not going to help you destroy reality as we know it." "You don't have a choice," Quinn said, her voice distorting, multiple tones speaking in harmony. "You are already part of the process. Your presence here has accelerated the breach. Even now, your unique quantum signature is calling to the void, drawing them through." The quantum stabilizer pulsed brightly, its glow intensifying as the room's temperature dropped sharply. Frost formed on surfaces, spreading rapidly across the floor toward Vance. "The final phase has begun," Quinn announced, her body starting to change, flesh rippling, form expanding beyond human limitations. Your resistance is irrelevant, Harbinger. You were created for this moment. Vance fired his weapon. The energy blast struck Quinn directly and passed through her as if she were made of smoke. She laughed, the sound reverberating painfully inside Vance's skull. Physical weapons cannot harm me anymore. I exist in multiple states simultaneously. The distortions from above descended, surrounding Vance. Cold, alien presences brushed against his mind once more, but stronger now, more insistent. The Harbinger awakens, the way opens, we come. Trapped between Quinn's transformed body and the encircling entities, Vance made the only choice left to him. He turned his weapon on the quantum stabilizer and fired repeatedly, pouring energy into the delicate machinery until it overloaded. The explosion knocked him off his feet, sending him crashing into the wall as the stabilizer erupted in a blinding flash of quantum energy. Quinn screamed, a sound that transcended human vocal capabilities, vibrating through multiple realities at once. "What have you done?" she shrieked, her form fluctuating wildly between human and something else. "Without the stabilizer, the breach will collapse catastrophically." "That's the idea," Vance said, struggling to his feet as the room began to tear itself apart around them. "Better a controlled collapse than whatever you had planned." "Fool, you've doomed us all." Quinn's body contorted impossibly, stretching toward him with limbs that shouldn't exist. "The feedback will shatter reality across multiple dimensions." Vance ran, diving through the doorway as the quantum energy surged. Behind him, Quinn's inhuman screams cut off abruptly as the room imploded, taking her and the surrounding entities with it. "Zara," Vance tried again, limping down the corridor as emergency bulkheads began to seal automatically. "Are you back online?" His neural implant flickered, then stabilized. "Connectivity restored," Zara announced. "Warning, quantum cascade detected, facility collapsing on multiple dimensional planes." "Tell me something I don't know," Vance grunted, forcing his way through a partially closed bulkhead. "Can we still reach the control center?" "Negative, all direct routes compromised. However, the quantum collapse is creating a new opportunity. Sensors detect a temporary stability node forming on level 5, section 7. It's drawing energy from the collapse." "What's there?" "Unknown, but it appears to be the focal point of the remaining dimensional stability." Another choice with no good options. Stay and definitely die as the facility tore itself apart, or head toward the mysterious stability node and probably die. Vance checked his weapon's charge, nearly depleted after overloading the stabilizer, and began moving toward level 5. Behind him, reality continued to unravel, corridor sections vanishing into swirling vortices of quantum energy. Ahead, something waited, something that had been planning this moment for years. And Vance had the growing, terrible suspicion that destroying the stabilizer might have been exactly what it wanted all along.